Thank you once again for finding time to be part of Question Time. We are back, yes, and we're asking all the right questions and hoping that we can get all the right answers. And I'm sure with the guests that we have, we'll be getting all the right answers. My name is Herman Machacha. Don't forget that you can also take part on Question Time by sending your message to 0955 705460, as well as calling on 0215 3854. Make use of our social media platform. You can go to Facebook. You will find us. It is KNC Television. Madam Laura Miti is my guest on Question Time. She is the Executive Director for Alliance for Community Action, ACA. Madam Miti, welcome to Question Time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome to Kabwe.
Thank you.
Yeah. What is your impression of Kabwe Town, coming from the capital city?
It's all right, but
right.
I think you guys need to ask for a bigger share of the national cake. The rest of the country does.
But how do we go about doing that?
I think, first of all, is not to accept that Lusaka is Zambia, because this is how this country is run right now. When you go to Lusaka, you might as well be in a different country. And while Lusaka, as the capital city, will always be better, have better facilities, I think the extent to which resources are poured into Lusaka in services as compared to other towns and especially rural areas is unjust and unequitable.
Yeah.
And so I always think that sometimes this country treats rural areas and treats other towns like stepchildren, and Lusaka is Zambia, and so we need to begin to distribute our resources a little more equitably.
Right. We'll get into the nitty-gritties of that, but tell us about Alliance for Community Action, because one might think, the moment you hear Alliance, maybe I'm thinking, is it a political party or something? Tell us about your organization.
The Alliance for Community Action is an NGO. We work primarily in the issue of public resources. So our main objective is to grow the demand and supply of accountability when it comes to public resources, public money. And when we talk about public resources, we take a broader view than just money. You know, our democracy is a public resource, our youth are a public resource. And we believe that Zambians need to demand accountability just a little bit more than they do now. And our main objective is to transfer the demand for accountability away from organizations like ourselves into the general public, because we think that while government actors will ignore individual organizations, they will never ignore a groundswell of a demand for accountability and better services that actually reflect the kind of resources we have as a country.
I'm glad that you've actually given us a broader perspective or a different point of view in as far as public resources are concerned, because for me, I would be thinking money. But then you bring in a whole new dimension, talking about issues of the accountability and the governance and so forth. Let's talk about the governance first of all, and in relation to good governance versus bad governance. How is the governance systems from your point of view as Alliance for Community Action?
I think our governance system right now is very weak. We're in a very bad space. We've actually degenerated. We were in a much better space a few years ago. But right now we are in a place in which it feels as though power holders, those in power, are in it for themselves. They have got very little respect for the public. The public are denied basic rights, basic civil and political rights, for example. Meeting is difficult, assembly is difficult, you get very little information, but I think even worse, social and economic rights. If you look at citizens' access to health, access to education, access to just a decent life, very, very poor. So our governance has taken steps backwards. You get the sense that we had reached a point, especially maybe mid MMD, in the years that we had MMD as a government, the 20 years that we had MMD as a government, there was a point there where you felt that those in power knew that they served at the pleasure of the people. There was a respect. There was a sense of power that the public held, and they believed that those in power are there because we put them there, and we can remove them when we want, and we can speak to them, and those in power respected the public. I think that has changed a lot. Right now, when you observe and you listen to the government in office right now, they believe they are the power. And with this disdain, this disrespect for citizens. And once that happens, then your governance system is in trouble, because governance in a democracy is about those in power knowing that we're put here by those by the general public, and our choices should benefit the general public. But the sense now is choices are made that are there to benefit those in office.
But how do we turn around the tide? Because now we are in the situation that you've mentioned, and then, and I'm glad that you've identified that. But here's the general populace. How do we turn around all these state of affairs? Because in borrowing the example that you've given, MMD time somewhere there, and along the way just getting into a situation that you've described. But how do we turn around the tide now?
I think it is by educating the public. The problem we are sitting with is a public that genuinely has begun to believe that they are powerless. But the public is never powerless. You see, so you need the public to understand, first of all, that they are right holders. They have the right to ask questions. They have a right to a minimum standard of living. They have the right to services that reflect the kind of resources that the government is holding. So I think what you need is a mindset shift. And it was there under MMD. The public believed, so the public saw themselves in relation to government differently. And I think PAF, largely because of violence, largely because of being using kind of brute force, the whole issue of cadres, I think, is what has changed, has frightened the public into cowering slowly. And the generation of democracy is not an event, it's a process. It's been taking place slowly since 2011, and we didn't notice until we reach a point where a vibrant public is suddenly fearful. Zambians were not fearful before. So slowly we've degenerated across, whether it's constitutionalism, whether it is the extent to which we have a president that is actually governing, the kind of ministers we have, the quality of ministers we have. Now we have ministers who I think would not have made DC under MMD, would not have made provincial minister under UNIP. The office of minister used to be very dignified. It was only a certain kind of citizen, a certain kind of experience that would give you the office of minister. Now we have people who are essentially thugs. When you look at them and you think, how did this person become a minister? Because when you look back at their history, who they've been, what they've done, and you think, you hold them and they're holding the office of minister. When you do that to the office, it means then the whole establishment dumps down, you see. So that is the situation we find ourselves in. And like I say, it's never an event, it's a process.
But maybe, these are people that we vote for. For example, we vote for them, they go to parliament, and it's from there that the crop of ministers is picked from. So at which point then do we begin to say that maybe the quality and the caliber of the leaders that we have probably could have come from that background that you're mentioning?
True, but they're also adopted. When political parties begin to adopt individuals, like Bowman Lusambo.
Yes.
You see, you go in Bowman Lusambo, we saw him, the public saw him drag a man old enough to be his father in the street. Saw him as an absolute MMD thug. He's a minister now. What was his redemption? What was it? What was the redemptive process that allowed someone like the Minister of Lusaka to be minister? So the question now is not. It's not a question of insulting him as a person. It's just that as a public we begin to ask ourselves, when given the 16 million Zambians that are there that could hold that position, when you begin to decide that the person who's going to be your minister is someone like Bowman Lusambo, you're in trouble. You see, and so when you listen to him, when you listen to his discourse, you see his background. When you hear about a minister beating up people in by-elections, he's accused of this, he's accused of that. I don't think we should be able to say we did not expect this, because what the president has done is appointed someone with very violent background into a ministerial position. So yes, it is true that the president can only appoint people from parliament, but there are other people within parliament. And the president has remember, the president has about, 9 positions from the general public. And you can't say that we do not have those people that can take this position. So it is both who the political parties adopt, and therefore are put on party tickets for election, and then also ultimately, I think the president should have a little bit more, be a little more circumspect on who he chooses to appoint.
Before we just move on from this subject, could it then be right for me to assert that there is now a lot of political appointees as opposed to technocrats being put in this right position? Because I think this has come out so much as a cry that there are a lot of cadres who are appointed to these very, very important positions, not just in government in terms of ministries, but even in these other sensitive, departments within government.
I think so. It is a case of the quality of people that are being appointed. We are finding ourselves with a very, the pool from which we are picking is very poor. Yeah.
Let's move to the issue of resources. And when we started, I think you even made reference to this when you're talking about Lusaka, the even distribution of these resources, be it finances or the manpower that we're talking about. How is it really? Because I know that we picked Lusaka for virtue of it being the capital city. You would assume that obviously because it's where the president is, you would see certain things happening more than it would happen in other areas. Let's talk about the basket in terms of distribution of resource.
I think that the distribution of resources in the country needs to be a lot more equitable. So Lusaka, yes, is the capital, but Lusaka is a part of the country. It's a part of a family. And you get the sense that when you go to Lusaka, you're almost in a different country. You live just a few kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers out of Lusaka, and people are living in the Stone Age. No water. Children are walking to school. If you go to the rural areas, 50 kilometers, 40 kilometers is the nearest secondary school. So unless they can afford boarding, unless they can rent a little hut near the school, they cannot have an education. So I think that before we begin to build Lusaka, before Lusaka gets luxuries, the rest of the country should get its necessities. You see, and so I think one of the biggest problems is our lack of decentralization. We have not taken decentralization to heart. If you live in the further parts of Lusaka, you're forever having to travel to Lusaka to access facilities that should be there in your own town. In every single province in this country, you should be able to get your passport, you should be able to get your driver's license, there should be, your hospital should have a CT scan, your hospital, you shouldn't have to go to Lusaka. People shouldn't have to be referred from Luwingu to UTH. You see, because with each province, there should be at least one hospital in which every single medical process can be done. You see, so as a country, the fact that we are one, the fact that the rural Zambian has the same green registration card that the Lusaka Zambian has, does not seem to be taken into account. And the ones who will ask that question are the rural Zambians. But the rural Zambians are denied information, they are denied communication, so they've got no idea. They've got no idea how much of their resources end up in Lusaka. I am of the view that in the way we run this country, every single province should be able to keep a certain amount of the resources it raises. A certain amount of money that is raised in Solwezi should stay in a northwestern province and in Solwezi. A certain percentage of the taxes, of the resources raised out of Victoria Falls, out of tourism in the southern province, should stay in the southern province. Same thing in the eastern province. And then when you look at the full basket of resources, there should be an equitable share. A certain amount of resources must go to the provinces. And those resources must go according to need first. So the provinces in which there's more need should get more resources until we've built them up. You see, so the equitable share of resources is important, but as a country, we're not talking about these things. You see, we spend too much time talking about politics as politics, rather than the services that citizens can access.
Here is a country who's got a developmental agenda, obviously dependent on borrowing. We've been told that, of course, the country has to borrow for the purpose of investment. And now we're in a position where there's a debate about the current debt that this country holds. I'm sure there's been different positions. Of course, government has its own position with regards to how much debt it owes. Let's talk about that. I'm thinking it's good for government to borrow. I mean, it's for the purpose of investment. Let's talk about the issue of debt and vis-a-vis borrowing.
Yes, every country borrows, but the question with us is how much we've borrowed, where from, and how we've used that debt. We have overextended ourselves in terms of borrowing. So we've gone from a position in which we had maybe $1 billion debt in 2011 to anything from 8 billion that is acknowledged by government, 10 billion that is acknowledged by government, to 16 billion that is said by the IMF. Why? You see, so we've overextended ourselves. We've borrowed in a very opaque manner. It's not transparent. The citizens don't even know exactly how much we borrow. Yes. We do not know what we've done with the debt. But the worst thing is we've borrowed for consumption. We've borrowed to spend. It's the equivalent of a family borrowing to buy flat screen TVs, borrowing to buy fancy cars, and yet they do not own their home, and yet they cannot pay the rent, and yet the children are out of school. Our problem with our debt is, first of all, it is way too much. We've now reached a stage in which we are spending 30% of our budget to pay back the debt, and yet the result of that is that now citizens are being overtaxed. We are seeing too many toll gates. The toll gates have become a way of fleecing citizens. The cost of driving from Lusaka to the Copper Belt in any direction. And because citizens are quiet, they're just now beginning to mushroom toll gates. Nobody tells us where that money goes to. The government is trying to get money in every single way it came from citizens who are already poor. And it is citizens who did not benefit from the debt. You see, because what debt we saw, we are told it built infrastructure. But again, if you read the Auditor General's report, if you read the Financial Intelligence Center report, you hear that much of the projects that we are implementing are at inflated price. So what we could build for 1 million, we are building for $4 million. So we are inflating the price. Where does the difference of that money go? Into private pockets. So yes, we've seen a little bit of projects being built, and yet those projects again are built at way higher cost than is actually true. If you read the recent Financial Intelligence Center report, and also from the last 2 years, a whole Eurobond has disappeared. You see, because this year we are being told 6.1 billion kwacha has gone. The other year we had 4 billion kwacha. If you put it together, a whole Eurobond has gone into private pockets. So our debt has been borrowed, but it has not improved the country. And yet now we are overextended and we can't pay back.
So then what does this mean in terms of now managing, the economy and the welfare of the people of Zambia? Because already now this debt has to be paid back.
Yes, the economy seems to be crashing. The debt has to be paid back, and so now the public is beginning to pay. The ACA runs a campaign on debt which says, debt concerns me, they borrow, we pay, and we are seeing it, aren't we? Because the same poor people, same people with no water, the same people with no schools are now being asked to pay more in terms of taxes. And we've seen it, salaries are being delayed. Most secondary schools have not received, in fact, let me say schools have not received their disbursement for years. The CBU is closed because government essentially is broke. So we are sitting in a point at which government is broke because it borrowed and we don't know where the money went.
Interesting. You made reference to the Financial Intelligence report. It's a report that has gotten mixed reactions. When it was released, obviously we saw, I think, a debate around it. The Drug Enforcement Commission raised concerns that it was publishing raw data, and also compromising investigation. The president gave his position over this matter, and obviously we saw other players, even Mr. Yusuf Dodi as well, through his organization, gave a position that the release of inaccurate information affecting and denting the country's image. Why has this report received all these reactions? And yet this is a report done by a body that is instituted by our own laws.
Well, it has pointed out the extent of the thuggery, the extent of the theft. You see, so people are coming out to defend themselves essentially. Because if you read the FIC report, it says it is politically exposed persons that are essentially robbing the poor blind. But I think that the FIC itself has done a very good job of defending itself, and it has shown that it is not raw data. I think anybody who listened to the FIC chairperson's interview on TV and their statements have shown that before any report is given to the citizens, a report has been given in full detail to the presidency and to law enforcement agencies months before.
Okay.
By the time we are receiving a report, this is old news. The law enforcement agencies have been given enough time to investigate, one. Secondly, what we get is a very summarized report. So the FIC does its best to ensure that we're getting only the summary and in a way that cannot compromise investigations. So like you say, why this fight, why this battle against the FIC? And I think the bigger question is, we have not heard even a single person in power express concern at the figures.
That's the thing.
6.1 billion kwacha gone. And all you're saying is, why have you told the people? They've told the people before. FIC report 2017, FIC report 2016, Auditor General's report, the fire trucks, the ambulances, all these issues. Not once have we seen an arrest. And yet, the government keeps saying you are preventing us from investigating. How come? How come you never investigate? So what we are saying is the house is burning, but don't tell the people inside the house. That's all we want. It seems that the president, the ministers, and everybody in power, their only worry is to ensure that the general public does not hear. The general public must not know the extent to which they are being robbed. Because if the general public knows, it gets angry, and the public gets angry, it translates to the vote. And their positions are then are then endangered. Otherwise, nobody seems to care. But if you link the FIC report to the state of our hospitals, no medicine. Whenever we go there, we are getting a prescription. Our children are out of school. They've cut meal allowances. That is what the government and the president and everybody in power does not want to happen. They do not want the ordinary citizen walking on the street, the person at the market, to make that link. You see, to say, how could that 6.1 billion have been better used? So what we as the ACA and generally civil society is waiting to hear is to hear someone within power say, how can we lose so much money in a country in which services are so poor? When we hear that, maybe we can listen to the issue of raw data. But the truth is that no raw data has been given to the public.
So this would be good to assume that it is actually has the potential to scare away investors and dent the country's image?
No. Investors will run away because of our level of corruption. See, there's a line in the FIC report that nobody's talking about that's really frightening. It says that so much of this corruption happens when those in power give contracts to shell companies. Shell companies are companies that don't exist. They employ no one, okay? So, and they pay no taxes. So, and sometimes these shell companies don't even deliver on the contracts, which means it's as good as just taking a lot of money and giving it to a political exposed person, and the money goes out of the country, builds 49 houses for individuals. But there was this line. It says the level of corruption in this country is closing out legitimate business. What that means is that you and I, the person at the market, the ordinary Zambian, cannot access the business because all government resources are going to each other. So someone in Kabwe trying to deliver supply to Mkobeko won't be allowed because that whole contract will go to a politically exposed person and the shell company. If you are preventing legitimate business, you are leading to the high unemployment. So if you're a young person in Zambia, you need to understand that you are unemployed because the economy cannot grow, because the resources are going to private citizens, you see. So the resources are not going to Trade Kings or Zambeef or real companies. They're going to shell companies, which becomes very problematic.
Right. So then what do we do as the public with regards to this trends report? Yes, we've got it. It's got in this debate. It seems, the powers that be are the ones that are debating a lot about it. But then here we are as the public. We have this information. what do we do about it? What can we do about it?
One is be angry. Feel it. This is your money. It's why you are not at university. It is why you don't have a job. It is why your mother died. It is why your daughter died because there was no medicine. Link it to your life. Then link it to your vote. Then link it to the way you speak to public officers. Take power back into your hands. Because as we've seen, those in power are refusing to engage us. They are refusing to arrest each other. They're absolutely refusing everybody. We've had the president, we've had the Minister of Information, we've had the PS of Information, we've had organizations that are aligned to government. Everybody has come together to just say, don't tell the public. Nobody has come up to say who will be investigated. Nobody's showing worry. So the only people who can worry are those of us who are affected by this kind of loss of money in our services, in the level of poverty, in the hunger. This country is not poor. This country is badly managed. And unless the people who are being affected by the bad decisions being made begin to ask questions and begin to link especially this to their vote, there's no difference. There'll be no difference. So we as the general public need to make sure that we hold PF to account. Otherwise, any new government, doesn't matter which government comes into power, will do the same thing to us. So linking our anger to a vote is not to say we believe any other government will be better. It's to say we need to take our power back so that those who are in power, whoever they might be, begin to respect us.
So here is the Auditor General's report. Here now is the Financial Intelligence Report, trends that have been published year in, year out, and yet we've got investigative wings. So in this case, it seems like these reports are a mere academic exercise because we've not heard of anybody even being convicted of corruption. No wonder maybe even as we are speaking of corruption, nobody has been convicted, especially in terms of the leaders. So for them, it's like throwing caution to the wind. Let's talk about the ability of the investigative wings to deal with corruption, cited in the FIC as well as the Auditor General's report.
I think they probably have the ability, but they do not have the will. And the lack of the will, I think, is because they're being held back by politicians. You see, so the FIC is different. I don't know what it is about the FIC, but they've decided to keep with their mandate. The ACC as well, Anti-Corruption Commission, has a mandate, as the police, as does the DEC. But as we've seen, you have to have been removed from office. So you have to be, before we hear that you are corrupt, you have to either have been to have resigned or fired. And this is not only this government, even governments before, starting even the first time we ever heard about corruption, I think maybe like under President Manawasa. Our problem is governments only carry out a corruption fight retrospectively. We need to have, for the first time, a president and a government that will refuse ongoing corruption. Because in this country, if just for 2 years, we had a government that prevented theft, this country will change. Because listen to the amounts. The 6.1 billion is in 9 months. And remember that this 6.1 billion is not the total amount lost.
Yes.
It is random selection. The FAIC just reports random selection. So we probably lost 20 billion, 30 billion, if we look at the whole picture. The same thing with the Auditor General's report. They don't go to every single ministry and every single transaction. It's a random sample. Auditing is a random sample. So if we plugged the holes for a short period of time, and we had a government that cared for the people and said these resources are going to go to the poor first before ourselves, and we're going to make choices that affect, that benefit the people, there would be a change. So that is what we as the people need to demand, that we have those in power run this country for the benefit of the weakest among us, for the poorest among us.
Right. I want to refer you to two ministers that made statements that are a bit similar. And this, I think, is in relation to the issue of corruption, the issue of ministers donating huge sums of money and so forth. Let me start with Minister of Labour and Social Security, that is Honorable Joyce Nonde. She recently urged the public to stop painting ministers as corrupt by virtue of their positions. And again, Minister for Lusaka Province, Mr. Lusambo says Minister ministers not dirty. It's wrong to assume that we are corrupt. Lusaka Province Minister, Boma Lusambo, he says Zambians must change their mindsets and accept that politicians are also human beings entitled to plan and invest for their future to avoid destitution. So I think this came from the Zambia Daily Mail. Look, it's open. I mean, stop, first of all, painting ministers as corrupt by virtue of their positions. Minister Lusambo said, look, Zambians must change their mindset towards and accept that politicians are human beings that need to plan and invest in their future to avoid destitution. What is your reaction to
maybe they could share with us these miracle businesses. That's all we are asking. That's why we want to get rich. You know what I mean? Yeah. The ordinary people want these miracle formulas. Minister Lusambo was an MMD cadre with no two coins to rub together 3 years ago. Okay? So 2011, we saw him. Can he share this formula, this business, put it out? This is my business. These are the taxes I've paid. This is who I employ. These are my profits. We will not complain. What we are saying is we have seen people who were our neighbors suddenly have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties, can fly their children all over, can take their children to schools that cost $20,000 a year. And yet we knew them yesterday. So the issue is simply that you're asking us to refuse our own logic. You're asking us to say, are you papas? Are you miracles? Did you go to a church where they laid hands on your money and your money multiplied? We know the ministerial salaries. We know it is impossible from any ministerial salary to get the kind of wealth that Minister Lusambo is now showing off. We know that it is impossible from a salary to have the kind of money that former spokesperson Amos Chanda, president spokesperson Amos Chanda began to display. All of them, cadres, people who have no job. You see, so how without a known job are you getting this rich? And because of the ability of people in power to get rich, we've all begun to accept corruption. You know, we've begun to think it is possible to get rich miraculously. It is not possible to get super rich without a known source of income unless you're corrupt, unless you're stealing. It is just not possible. So I challenge Minister Lusambo to tell us, lay it out for us. These are my businesses. These are the people I employ. These are the taxes I'm paying. You have people who are this rich who don't pay taxes. And because they don't pay taxes, our young people remain unemployed. There are no jobs for them. So we have a government that thinks that they can govern via winning debates, via arguing illogically, because it is not logical for you to know me now. I drive a battered little Corolla. I have maybe a little bit of a small house somewhere. And tomorrow you hear Laura Mita has 20, 30 houses within 5 years. I'll have to explain it.
Planning and investing.
How? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So share with us exactly that plan and investment so that the young people who are on the street can also do it. That's all we're saying.
We're looking at a situation where right now, I think still on the subject of corruption, we're looking at a period where you've got ministers who've been, allegedly been cited for corruption, appearing in court and still serving as ministers. And you have those who were cited in the social cash transfer, been fired and so forth. Is the fight against corruption selective?
It's very selective. The one who was fired because the British were throwing their toys out of the court. We all know. You see. But otherwise, even then there was arguments. No, it's not true. You see, we have a situation in which citizens are being forced. You're seeing something, you can see it's black, you're being told it's white. You can see it's yellow, you're being told it's blue. A minister who is going to court for corruption and is in office can hide evidence. They are saying that the FIC report can cause people to hide evidence. What more a minister who's been cited? You see, so there is no fight against corruption. What is there is a fight to stop the public knowing the extent of corruption. That's what's there. But otherwise, the fight against corruption is completely non-existent.
Let me take you back to the former press aide, Mr. Amos Chanda. For some reason, he says that he was cited in the FIC report.
I don't know.
Yeah, there was that I don't know, somehow the fake report cited him to have had so much money. But away from that, there's the issue of the lifestyle audit. Again, that keeps coming up so now and then, and probably he feels that maybe that is institutionalizing witch hunt and so forth. Let's talk about that in terms of managing public debt and in relation to the FIC. Here's an individual that seems to also have a position with regards this particular subject, and especially in relation to lifestyle auditing, where I think you've been referring to, even as you talk about the issue of where people have gotten their wealth within such a possible time.
Yes, a lifestyle audit is just what I'm talking about. This is your lifestyle. You can fly all over for holidays. Your children go to the American school. The American school costs $20,000 per year. In other words, 200,000 kwacha. You've got 3 children. You're paying almost $1 million kwacha per year. We know your salary. Explain to us. You see, so there has to be a link between what you earn legally and what you spend. Okay, so if someone said, Laura, I would like to have a lifestyle audit for you, I'd say, by all means, come. This is my salary. This is where I live. This is the kind of car I drive. This is the school my son goes to. If those together don't add up, I must either be in massive debt, I must have a loan from somewhere which I'm servicing or not servicing to pay for that lifestyle. I must be able to explain. You must be able to explain. The president must be able to explain. The person at the market must be able to explain. I work at the market. I order tomato and onion. My profit per day is this amount. My profit per month is this amount. Therefore, I can afford to pay a house in Luangwa for 100 kwacha, 200 kwacha, 500 kwacha. If someone is at the market but is paying for a house that costs, I don't know what the most expensive house in Kabwe is, and their children go to the most expensive school in Kabwe and all that, it's either they have miracle powers or they have a source of income that nobody knows about. That's what a lifestyle audit is. Right. But the people in power, what we're saying, the people in power, so the thing with Zambia is we know each other. So we know all these people in power. We know who they were in 2010. We know who they are today. Where have they got millions and millions of kwacha? Where is this a business? Again, I keep saying, just share the business formula with the young people, so the young people can also begin to earn these kinds of money. Are you suggesting that all these young people are there and are unintelligent? You see, so obviously, it seems to us that what the FIC is suggesting, that money is transferred in millions and billions out of the treasury through contracts, which contracts then do not benefit the people. That is what is happening. And one thing you will see in this country is when people who are in office leave office, the way their standard of living plummets is interesting. It is because when they are in office, I call it, they feed from the IV. You know, they have an IV straight from the treasury into their bloodstream. There's no work. And you know, when you're removed from the IV, what happens?
Yeah.
Your health goes back. Or if you're connected to the pipeline, when you're disconnected from the pipeline, something goes wrong. You see. So we're not saying we want our ministers to be poor. We are saying that their level of wealth must be connected in such a way that it must be a function of the money we know they are earning from legitimate businesses.
Can we be talking about debt in a country that is endowed with so much resources, from agriculture to the mining sector and so forth? Why are we in such a predicament?
The money we are trying to get from the IMF has been stolen. If you look at the FIC, we keep saying IMF. We want, I think, 1.2 billion from the IMF. This is the money that has been stolen. If you look at the last 3 FIC reports, we don't need to borrow. But apart from borrowing, we don't need to be this poor. We are the kind of country, it's an example of a parent who is maybe a doctor, their wife is a minister, or and brings home 20,000 per month, and their children are out of school. And their lights have been switched off. That is Zambia. The kind of resources we have in our mining, in our tourism, if we manage these resources prudently, no Zambia should have no toilet. No Zambia should be relieving themselves in a plastic. No child should be out of school. Our children in UTH are dying because there's no disinfectant. Children go in with a rash and come out with TB. because they get infected within the hospital. They get diarrhea or disease within the hospital, and they are dying. You see, these are the things we need to talk about. We take these children, you take your child who died from a disease they should not have had, and we bury them as a public. We just bury them.
Right.
As if it was God's plan. No, it was not God's plan. It is because you have a government that is failing to service the country at a very minimum level. And that, I keep saying, should make you angry. Don't bury your children for no reason because someone else has built 49 houses with your money.
Hearing from how you are speaking with such a passion about these issues, are you yielding results, especially in your fight with regards, getting people to start demanding for accountability, and I think taking a stock into how their resources are being managed? Are you yielding results, given the current situation?
I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. I think I have noticed that people are beginning to talk a lot more, and I don't know about ourselves as ACA alone. We are part of a wider civil society family, and I think civil society has been trying 4 years to change the mindset of people. I think somehow we are being listened to. The problem is maybe the public just does not know what to do about some of these things, and also we need to go deeper into the country, deeper into the townships, deeper into the rural areas to get people to understand this link, to understand that they need to demand accountability just a little bit more. And the demand for accountability is sober, is respectful, is lawful. Nobody is saying, even calling for anything like an uprising. If the general public could, via their voices, via their vote, via their engagement with duty bearers, begin to demand accountability, those in power would be forced to supply it. Life would be easier for those in power and easier for us at the bottom. You see, the point is, ask yourself, has the PF enjoyed this time in power? Wow. Every day is a scandal. Every day we are fighting. Every day you see the president at the airport. He is fighting with someone or other. He's making this kind of... He can't have enjoyed this presidency. Surely even he wants a period of time where what he's doing is governing, not always firefighting. So when you have accountability, I know sometimes those in power think those demanding for accountability are after them. Your life can actually be better if you supply accountability, if you govern in the interest of the people. I've said before, you can take people, you can silence people like myself, you can silence the ACA, you can silence civil society by simply governing rightly. Then we can go and do what we were meant to do. I can go back to teaching, which is what I was trained to do. Right now I'm way out from my my profession. It is nobody enjoys every day waking up to a scandal. And neither does the PF. The PF has not enjoyed this time in power.
Right.
It needs to, in the last 2 years maybe.
So then how do organizations like yourselves, political parties inclusive, offer checks and balances, demand for accountability when maybe, for example, the Minister of Finance will say negative sentiments are what are affecting the economy?
Well, we know they're not. So we continue to ask for accountability. What is affecting the economy is stealing. What is affecting the economy is mismanagement of resources, it's bad budgetary choices, it's buying a jet at a time when you've closed the CBU, it's all these things. You can't say that because I have told you that there's a panel there, I'm the one who's causing the foundation to crumble in your house. You see? So no, stop asking the public to keep quiet, to suffer in silence, which is what essentially these ministers are doing, while they themselves are making no sacrifices. So there is no connection.
So many things been happening. We just came back from the National Dialogue Forum. Whilst we're still in there, people trying to get to understand what happened and what was resolved, and you have got people with different positions, organizations coming up to sort of start creating awareness on the National Dialogue Forum resolutions, and then we move to the FIC and so forth. Let me take you back to the same forum, the NDF. What have you picked up as the Alliance for Community Action resolutions, deputy ministers and the coalition government? And one would think, okay, at least the government here is trying to, bring some sanity in as far as the constitution is concerned.
The NDF was problematic going in and problematic coming out. The ACA and other civil society organizations said it before. It came from Norway. And anybody who followed the way the PF was dealing with the question of the constitution, you knew that that NDF was going to try to legitimize a way of ensuring that the PF has an easier route back past 2021. So if you look at the issue of deputy ministers, why do they want deputy ministers back? They want deputy ministers because once you have deputy, first they made two important resolutions that affect our vote in 2021. The deputy ministers stay in office, come into office. Ministers do not vacate office. What that means is that you have ministers, you have deputy ministers who, during the elections, will be campaigning on government time, government cars, government resources. You don't need corruption then. They will be stealing legally almost. They'll be being undemocratic legally. So the biggest reason for deputy ministers, I can tell you, because nobody needs deputy ministers. Deputy ministers have got no work in this country. We have not missed them. I've not heard anyone who has missed the deputy ministers. So why would you bring back an office which, first of all, the public has said over and over they do not want, and then you bring them back, and it's already expensive, you're in austerity measures. The reason, of course, is that when you have deputy ministers, they can campaign plus ministers all over this country using resources. They'll still have their vehicles, they'll still have allowances. That is extremely clever, but it is devious. You see, you have the issue of the coalition government. Again, from Norway. How do you say you want a coalition government? The reason I can tell you is this. If you have a coalition government, even if you wanted to rig the elections, you don't have to rig for yourself. You rig for a smaller party. So all you need is to fight and get 40%. Another party maybe gets 43%. But you get another little party somewhere to get the 7, or 8, which gets you beyond 51%. It's, again, you see, you've got to grant it to the PF. You've got to grant it to Minister Given Luminda. They are clever. They are smart. And they can manipulate it without you seeing them. So if the public does not stand up against manipulation of their constitution cannot be changed via the NDF. It cannot be possible.
But it seems like, Madam Laura, this is like done and dusted already. It's past public debate now. It's only waiting to go to Parliament.
Exactly. But the public needs to understand what is happening to them. The public needs to understand that their constitution has been taken and is going to be changed in order to become a document that is there to advance the interests of one political party. Again, that is wrong. We've seen it backfire before. We've seen our constitution changed before for the interest of one person or of one party. That's how we changed the presidential parentage clause, remember?
Yes.
To Bakaunda. We brought it back later. We've messed around with, and people danced, remember? Nawakwi and these people dancing in Kaunda Alala. You never ever use the constitution to advance the interests of any side in a political in a political contestation. The constitution should belong to the people. And right now, what the Minister Given Luminda has done is take the constitution, bastardize it for the interest of the PF. The PF sooner or later will leave government and we will remain with this constitution that is not in the interest of the people. So all we can do is appeal to members of parliament to understand that this is not even about the PF. It's not even about political contestation. It is that this country needs at least one, something that we can hold on together and say, this we have not messed with. And that is the constitution. Because I think what is going to happen to the constitution now is probably the worst kind of manipulation that we've seen in the history of this country, where a political party decides to use the constitution for its own interest. But like you say, we have a government that doesn't listen. We have a government that just does whatever it wants. I sometimes wonder at this need to hold office. I don't know whether it is, I suppose it is the good life, but the extent to which you are willing to trample down the interests of 16 million people for your own little personal gain, I find really shocking. But I suppose that's his politics.
So what happens? We're looking at a people-driven constitution versus a constitution that will stand the test of time. So now how do we assure that in Zambia we'll have a people-driven constitution that will stand the test of time, seeing that even the current constitution was assented to in 2016 by the president. And you know, when he was signing it, he said, I'm going to sign this even with my eyes closed. And it was assented to.
If we allow Minister, given Luwina to have his way, we're not going to have a constitution that stands the test of time. It's going to be very problematic. Long after Mr. Luwina is gone, buried, his legacy is going to be this constitution, if it passes. You know, and you know when you listen to him, he sounds almost convincing about how this is for the country. But all you have to do is just look below the surface and understand, and you ask your question: how can someone as sober, as informed, as intelligent as Minister Luwina do this to a country?
Right. There's one subject that I cannot run away from, and I think this is more to do with resources and government trying to, I think, sort of be able to put in measures in terms of how we can tap the much-needed revenue in the country. Austerity measures. I mean, it's one thing, again, that is trending. The government has put up austerity measures. Obviously, this is in order to sort of deal with the issue to do with, I think it came from the issue to do with the kwacha, and I think it's all have to do with the economy. Let's talk about that. I'm thinking, yeah, step in the right direction. Austerity measures will save us money.
There are no austerity measures. If you look just now, they say the PSS should not travel. It is PSS who should travel because they are technocrats.
Okay.
They actually carry out the work on the ground. It is the ministers you should prevent from traveling. They've left out the ministers, left out the president. A PS traveling is not as expensive as the president. You know what it takes to move a president? For the president, even internal travel within the country is astronomically expensive. They've left themselves out from the list. So there's no austerity. The austerity measures that are announced now are the same ones that were announced by Minister Mutati when he was Minister of Finance.
Yes.
They just never implemented. Austerity, yes, we need, but it is not just, austerity doesn't come by it being announced. It comes by it being implemented. If we're really in austerity, the president would not have bought that jet. Just think about it.
Okay.
You know, if you can buy a $68 million jet during austerity, you know you're not in austerity.
Maybe I'm thinking that the jet is the property of Zambia.
You don't need it.
To still remain.
You do not need it. It's the same thing as daddy comes home with the flat screen when the rent hasn't been paid and the children out of school. The flat screen belongs to who? The family. Does that mean you needed it? No.
Okay. Interesting. As we're winding up the clock, obviously, I think of interest as well, Madam Laura, is the issue of the Kwabelt University. I know you touched on it, but I think we cannot avoid talking about this. This is an institution where people spend, you know, regardless of whether there are bursaries and so forth, but these are public resources. This is an institution that has been closed indefinitely. There's been a lot of debate about this as well. The president recently was on the Copper Belt, and people were hoping that I think he's going back to the Copper Belt would probably maybe an opportunity maybe to have it reopened. But alas, it seems, well, I don't know what will become of those who are students this time around. If it reopens next year or any other year, what would it mean to the academic performance? But let's talk about the issues surrounding CBU.
The government is broke. So they find every little excuse to close an institution. Already we have masses and masses of young people out of school. You keep these ones back, it means you've kept another set who should have at least gone into school on the streets. The children of the ministers and the president don't go to CBU. They go to school out of the country. At the very least, maybe they go to school in private universities. So what is happening in this country is you have those in power who do not live the lives of the ordinary people, so they don't care. Minister Kanduluo doesn't care. Her children will never be found at CBU. Not even her nieces will be found at CBU. You see, and again, it is a case of we, the ordinary Zambians, linking what we see, these choices to our lives, and demanding that CBU must be reopened and kept open. You see, we always ask us, we never seem to ask. They say, no, the children are violent. In the last 3 or 4 years, the ACA did a fact check. And we went, last time there was extreme violence. We did a fact check there, and we went there, and the management of CBU themselves told us that in the last 5 academic years, never have the students arrived and found their allowances. Finding their allowances is always a case of contestation. Now, it's not only about, you see, what people seem to think is that allowances are pocket money. No.
Okay.
Allowances, those allowances are for students to pay back the transport money they borrowed, Remember that to get a bursary in Zambia, usually you have to prove vulnerability.
Yes.
You have to prove both your parents are dead. You almost have to show your parents' grave. It is poverty-stricken children who end up mostly on a scholarship or a loan. So most of them have got no other means of surviving, which means, for example, because the meal allowances have been removed, a whole set of children will not go to university because they use that meal allowances for transport, they use it to pay the accommodation, they use it to pay for printing.
Yes.
When we were there, what we found, students told us that in a period when the meal allowances are delayed, there's this whole section of students that are absolutely hungry. They begin to borrow money from those who have money on Kaloba. So it is not just that the students just want money so that they can go to drink. They want money to survive. And they're always pushed to demand it until they end up on the street. The only way to prevent students is straightforward. Give them the money as soon as they arrive. But because the country is so mismanaged, there are no resources, and the country is broke, the students are never given their money on time. So stop blaming students for unrest at universities. Blame those in office. Give the students their money, but above all, like you're saying, we must reopen CBU. Because CBU and UNZA and especially these two institutions, they are the two that cater for the ordinary Zambian in Luwingu, in Mwese, in Lundazi, in Mufumbwe.
Right. You're concerned with public debt, and I want us to look at maybe as we wind up the impact or the effect on the young people, because obviously this debt will still have to be paid back either way, or like you mentioned, it's still being paid back in the long term or even in the short term. What effect does it carry now on the young people that probably, want a lot from this country?
Debt affects young people the most. It affects young people more than you and me. Because the young person is out of school now, is out of CBU now, is on the street because of that debt that was borrowed and most of it stolen. Therefore, we can not create jobs. The young person cannot access education now, cannot access health, cannot access loans and scholarship, all that. And that same young person is the one who's going to pay back the debt in years to come. Having been undereducated, having been kept hungry, the young person must worry more than even the adult person, because a whole generation's future has been mortgaged. It's being punished now, and it's going to be punished in the future. And like we say, they borrow, we pay. They borrow, the young people are the ones who are going to pay. And we actually have a crisis, a youth crisis in this country, which nobody's talking about. When you go into townships, you hear people talking about junkies or young people, 11 and 12-year-olds who are drunk, who are addicted to drugs, who are out of school, you have the age group between 18 and 25 is a terrible time in this country now. You're out of grade 12, you've got no money to go to college, you're sitting at home. If you drive around a town, you find young, able-bodied 20-year-olds sitting in a group when they should either be in school or working. That range of young people, they are the ones who must take this country back, because nobody's thinking about them. And if they don't fight to get this country back, they don't begin to speak up, they don't begin to use their vote, we are going to end up in real trouble. And I would call on those in power, worry about the youth.
Right.
You cannot mortgage, you cannot just not care about the situation in which our young people are right now.
Any activities that you're doing to get them involved, get them engaged, to understand, I think, the role they play in as far as making sure that they also demand, for what is theirs as far as this issue of resources is concerned?
Yes, we've been having debt isakas for young people. We had one here in Kabwe. We'll be having one in Kitwe, another one in Chipata, where we just break down the way debt works, how it is contracted, how it affects everyday lives. We also are going to be working here, especially in Kabwe, Mpika, Livingston, and in Lusaka, in constituencies. Actually, we're starting a new project called the US Project. And again, what we want is to train ordinary Zambians, very, very ordinary marginalized Zambians, people at the market, everyday Zambians, to understand the way public finance works, to understand who they should talk to follow up service delivery issues. If the issue that affects you is water, if it is schools, if it is health, who do you talk to, how do you ask questions in a systematic, respectful, sober manner. So what we want to do as the ACA is just get the general public First of all, with the information, the technical understanding of the way things work, and then the voice and the platforms to ask questions. So, for example, we'd like to get the position in which it is not Laura Miti sitting in this chair,
Yes.
but an ordinary Musonda Mwansa, market person, cadre even. You know, our cadres, the reason why they're so violent is they are denied real information. They don't understand how they're getting the crumbs. Nobody, I keep saying, said when they were 10-year-old, when they were 5 years old, inenga nakula, defo kubakada, nde uma abantu boshaye shiva. You know kind of thing.
Yeah.
You see, my aim in life is to be a cadre. Every single cadre is there because they are either unemployed, they don't have a business. Give those young people a job and a business. They'll not beat up people. So we have this real hatred for PF cadres. You know, as if that is what they want to be. Nobody wants to be a PF cadre who goes around with pangas. So what we are saying to the young people across board, you can be a PF cadre, you can be a UPND cadre, you can be anybody. Take this country back. You're a cadre yourself, do you want to give birth to cadres?
Right.
That's not what you want.
Well, finally, the church is alarmed by the hate speech, political violence, the levels of infighting within political parties ahead of the 2021 general elections. And very soon, and I know that most parties, from 2016, it's been about 2021, and we're talking about cadres and young people, and usually they're in the thick of things when it comes to political violence. What is your reaction to that as we end?
I think I'll say to cadres, refuse. Refuse. If you're a PF cadre, all of you who are PF cadres, what have you actually benefited from ultimately that you can hold on and say, this I can do? Only if you, even among them, they've made them into structures of America, Nani, Commando, Shani, you know kind of thing.
Yeah.
They've created animals out of other people's children. America, South Africa, in university. You take other people's children and make them panga holders. You see, so I'm hoping that the young people can begin to understand that and begin to refuse to be used. The rest of the country, we need to reduce this hatred we have for the political cadre and begin to understand what has created them. And begin to say, we cannot have another generation of 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds who begin to believe that inenga nakula, the only way to get to survive nafako t-shirt nanwako chibuko is to be a cadre. Who's creating this situation? It is those in power. They themselves just built 49 houses for themselves. It's not the cadres who get 49 houses. Maybe the youth chairperson of PF might get a few houses here and there. But the general public is a piece of meat here and there, 100 kwacha, 200 kwacha. That is not what you do to a whole generation of young people.
We want to thank you so much, and obviously we wish you all the best, and we look forward to working with you, obviously, with the innovations that you have with regards to working with young people.
Yeah, we look forward to working to you too, and thank you very much for having me.
Indeed. I've been talking to Madam Laura Miti. She is the Executive Director from Alliance for Community Action, ACA. And we've basically been narrowing in on some of the contentious issues with a focus on the matters related to public date. On behalf of the entire crew, my name is Herman Machacha. Make it again for another edition of Question Time. I hope that the answers have been to your satisfaction. As far as I'm concerned, well, I'm satisfied. God bless you, and thank you for watching.
Yeah.